Hello and welcome to OSHA Focal Points. I'm Sam Gallardo. I serve as the director of the PA OSHA Consultation Program. We are part of the world-renowned Safety Sciences program at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Each day, I receive notification from OSHA in Washington about every workplace fatality and catastrophic event that occurred the previous day. Workers involved in those incidents are no different than you. They all went to work, but they never went home. They never had a chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. In many cases, they did not follow the rules, regulations, and guidance designed to protect them. Our goal in providing OSHA Focal Points is threefold. First, to educate employees and employers on the top 25 areas that OSHA has identified during inspections. Second, is to supplement OSHA training that employers must provide to their employees. Third, and most important, is to help employees work safely and go home each day to enjoy the fruits of their labor. We hope that you learn and follow these important OSHA focal points. Have a safe day.
Today's topic is OSHA's Focus 4 in construction. The purpose of today's topic is to provide you with the essential need-to-know information about the hazards associated with the Focus 4. During the short presentation, we will briefly discuss the following topics, which include: why is the Focus 4 important? What are the Focus 4 hazards? How often do these hazards occur on a construction worksite? So what are the Focus 4 hazards? OSHA has found 90% of construction fatalities come from just these 4 hazards we're going to discuss. It's important to remember that these deaths were preventable. Falls are the leading cause of death in construction. Just in 2015, there were 350 fatal falls to a lower level out of the 937 construction fatalities. The second of the Focus 4 is electrical, the third is struck by, and the fourth is caught in or caught between. Let's discuss fall hazards. The primary cause of fall-related fatalities result from unprotected sides, edges, and holes, improperly constructed walking and working surfaces, improper use of access equipment, failure to properly use personal fall arrest systems, slips, trips, and falls as a result of housekeeping. So let's look at some hazards you may find in your job site. Is this a fall hazard? Yes. Workers could fall while climbing on the shoring structure to set it up and remove it. We should be providing ladders and lifts. Is there a hazard here? Yes. Workers are exposed to a fall hazard greater than 6 feet while working near this floor opening. Workers need to be protected from falls greater than 6 feet. Is this a fall hazard? Yes. Unprotected, open-sided floors that are 6 feet or higher above the next level. Guardrail systems, safety nets, or a personal fall arrest system are required. Any fall hazard here? Yes. Workers are installing a new metal roof without any fall protection provided. And in addition, their ladder. Make sure that all ladders extend at least 3 feet above the upper level. Is this a fall hazard? Yes. The photo shows a mid-rail and a toe board are missing on this open-sided floor of a building. Workers here are actually exposed to a 12-foot fall. Toe boards are required to protect any worker working below from being struck by equipment falling from above. Are you able to identify any fall hazards in this photo? You should be. There's a lack of fall protection for workers on the fabricated frame scaffold, and planks appear to be overloaded, and there's no safe access provided for workers to get to the scaffold. The workers are exposed to a 35-foot fall hazard from a scaffolding while stacking blocks prior to overhand bricklaying. Can you identify any fall hazards here? The ladder provided to the work platform is not sufficient in height. Again, all ladders on a construction site or in general industry, when used, must extend at least 3 feet above the upper level. Is this a fall hazard? Of course it is. The worker is working off the top of a step ladder. Are you able to identify the fall hazards on this residential construction job? There are several. We have a worker working on a carpenter's scaffold with no guardrails, extending too far beyond either end and is not nearly wide enough. The worker does not have any proper access to the scaffold. We have a worker inside the window that's not provided with fall protection, and there's no standard guardrail to protect that worker. the worker working below is exposed to struck-by hazards of tools or equipment that may fall from the upper scaffold. Are there any fall hazards here? Yes, workers working on the balcony of a structure are exposed to a fall hazard because it is an unprotected edge. Is this a fall hazard? Yes, this worker is working on a 8 to 12 pitch roof with only the lifeline tied to his waist as fall protection. Is this a fall hazard? It is. The scaffold was not erected with guardrails in areas where workers were working at heights greater than 10 feet. Struck-by hazards are the next in the Focus 4. The primary causes of struck-by fatalities include falling objects, vehicle or equipment strikes, or being struck by flying objects. Do you recognize any hazards? We need to avoid struck-by hazards by not working within the swing radius of any heavy equipment. Do we recognize any hazards? Grinding or striking materials can create flying object hazards. This worker is protected by equipment guarding and a face shield, but should also have safety glasses. Are there any hazards on this job site? Of course there are. The wrecking ball is loosely attached to the arm and could come loose and strike the operator's cab. In addition, a worker could be struck by the wrecking ball or hit or run over by the excavator itself. Do you recognize any hazards on this job site? The workers below have no head protection and are exposed to struck-by hazards from falling objects. How about this job site? Do you recognize any hazards here? Unsecured gas cylinders are being transported, exposing workers to struck-by hazards from flying projectiles. On this job site, can you see any hazards? This worker is working below suspended overhead materials and is exposed to falling or swinging struck-by hazards. Can you recognize any hazards on this job site? Here we have a highway construction worker who needs to wear high visibility reflective clothing to help prevent a struck-by hazard from the moving heavy equipment. Can you recognize any hazards? A slip-form paver had a blind spot to the rear, exposing workers to a struck-by hazard while the equipment was moving. In this case, a mirror was added to help the operator see. Can you recognize any hazards on this job site? Workers need to stay clear of loads that are suspended or about to be suspended, which create struck-by hazards from falling or swinging objects. Do you recognize any hazards? Powder-actuated tools can create flying object struck-by hazards. Never drive into easily penetrated materials when any workers are on the other side. The third hazard in the Focus 4 is caught in and caught between hazards. The primary causes of caught in or caught between fatalities include trench or excavation collapse, rotating equipment, unguarded parts, equipment rollovers, or poor equipment maintenance. On this job site, can you recognize any hazards? We have a potential crushing hazard from the overhead boulder and no protective system in this excavation. Can you recognize any hazards on this job site? Caught-in hazards occur when a worker could be caught inside or in between different objects. Are there any hazards on this job site? Yes. We have an unguarded belt and pulley. Any worker could get their hand or part of their clothing caught in these running nip points. Can you spot a hazard on this job site? Yes. Gloves, long sleeve shirts, jewelry, or any loose-fitting clothing can be hazardous if it's caught in any moving parts. Can you recognize a hazard in this trench? Here we have a worker in an unprotected vertical wall trench performing pipe work, and this worker is exposed to being completely engulfed by the trench should it collapse. In addition, this trench was dug next to a residential structure with no protective system in use, and the ladder is at the end of the trench, limiting access. Are there any hazards on this job site? Here we have a lockout-tagout issue where the truck box is not blocked. Do you see any hazards on this job site? Here we have an employee that could be caught between the track of a dozer and the stationary wall. Do you recognize any hazards on this job site? Here a crane boom was not adequately supported when the pins were removed during dismantling. Never work under the truss boom during dismantling. If this is your job site, can you recognize any hazards? Here we have unstable footing on a scaffold by using a concrete block. The fourth hazard in the Focus 4 is electrical, and the primary causes of electrocution fatalities include contact with overhead power lines, contact with live circuits in the panels, poorly maintained cords and tools, and lightning strikes. If this is your job site, can you recognize any hazards? Ensure that no employee is permitted to work in proximity to any part of an electric power circuit where the worker could contact the power circuit. If this is your job site, can you recognize any hazards? In this trench, we have crossing electrical lines that must be supported, protected, or removed to safeguard the workers working inside the trench. On this job site, can you recognize any hazards? Here we have spliced electrical extension cords. They should be marked "Do Not Use." In addition, they're creating a slip, trip, and fall hazard. Do you recognize any hazards on this job site? First, there's no GFCI. Second, the system is not properly grounded. Third, there are openings where conductors have entered and there are not closed protecting the workers. Fourth, we're missing covers on the boxes. And fifth, panel boards were not dead front. Do you recognize any hazards with this equipment? The electric drill's cord was spliced to a non-flexible conductor with damaged insulation, creating an electrical hazard. Do you recognize any hazards on this job site? This scaffold was erected just 4.5 feet from a 7.2 kilovolt power line. Do you recognize any hazards at this job site? There's no continuous path to the ground, and multiple cords are being used for fixed equipment. Are you able to recognize the hazard in this photograph? Here we are operating equipment without any grounding protection. Do you recognize any hazards at this job location? Here we have conductors entering boxes, cabinets, or fittings that are unprotected from abrasion. Do you recognize any hazards on this job site? Flexible cords and cables may pass through doorways or other pinch points only if the protection is provided to avoid damage. In 2015, there were 4,836 fatalities in workplaces across the United States, of which 937 were construction related. Falls constitute 39% of those 937 fatalities. 85% of all OSHA citations and 90% of all dollars applied as fines are related just to the Focus 4 hazards we discussed. 79% of all fatalities that occur on construction sites are related to these Focus 4 hazards. To remain injury-free starts with planning, effective training, routine on-site inspection, management oversight, incorporating lessons learned, and always reassessing and reevaluating the worksite. To get more help with the Focus 4 construction, go to OSHA.gov. Thank you.